This is a pair of Victor Talking Machine Company Model Rs, or Royal. This machine was introduced in 1902, and I think it's actually one of their best machines for a front mount machine. It's small, about the size of the trademark Berliner or the early Victor Model B, but it's a really good playing motor and a really good sounding machine. And these are two slightly different ones, and I'll get into the differences in a minute. But this machine was also marketed with a back mount, so that the back mount would come out and the horn would be over here, like the more modern gramophones. That was done and sold as a Victor 1. So this is really a Victor 1, but what the company decided to do was, instead of making it a back mount machine, they also sold it as the older style front mount machine to reduce the cost so that people could afford it. Because as a back mount, I believe the Victor 1 was about $25, which was a large sum of money in those days. Now, the catalog back then for Victor showed that they would still use letters for the front mount machines, and they would use Roman numerals for the back mount machine. So you got your Victor 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. But it turns out that there was some overlap, and sometimes you find machines that look like they're mislabeled. Also, these were designed to be adapted for the back mount. So once the person owned it, they could later upgrade to a back mount machine, or the dealer could do that. When you come in closer, you'll get a good look at the two plates here that cover the part where the back mount could be mounted on the machine. They're slightly different plates. This one says, remove this plate to attach rigid arm, because that's what the tone arm was called back in 1902 to 1904. It was the rigid tone arm. It was straight. Then this one says, remove this plate to attach the tapered arm. After 1904, they tapered the tone arm, and so this one would have been for a slightly later version of the tone arm. So I'm going to bring you in close. We'll take a look at these two machines. This is the earlier Victor R, and you can see the metal bed plate here on the top. It's hard to tell if this was anodized. It may have been, but this one's very dark. You can see some of the anodizing on the support arm. And this tone arm is called a Gibson metal tone arm. This was patented by Robert Gibson, and his story is rather interesting, and I'll tell it in a minute. But let's look at this plate. There's the plate you need to remove, and you can see it doesn't completely cover the hole there for the back mount. You can tell the Victor R, it's really easy to identify because of these metal corner posts. It has a metal elbow rather than a leather elbow. And then we go over here, we can see the other side. And then let's go around and see the ID tag. Here's the ID tag. And you can see this one still has a record hold down, which was removed in around 1904 with the next model. You can see again that strange looking metal tone arm. So what's the story behind this tone arm? Well, we got to go back a little bit earlier in the history of the gramophone, back to before Victor was a company. Originally it was the Berliner Gramophone Company, and Eldridge Johnson was the one who built the machines, and he eventually got a hold of the patents and founded the Victor Talking Machine Company. But back then, before there was Victor, the marketing was done by a person named Frank Seaman. And he was unhappy with the deal, and so he had other machines designed and built to try and lower his prices and costs. And one of them was designed by Robert Gibson. And that machine didn't take off because of the patent suits that were going on at the time. But Robert Gibson was an early innovator who did some of the inventing of some of the technology in that era. And so once Eldridge Johnson had the Victor Talking Machine Company, he sold this metal tone arm, which was designed by that maker, Robert Gibson. So these are quite rare. I've got another machine I'm going to show, Victor Z, or Z, depending on where you live, that also has a Gibson tone arm. So it's kind of a nice feature, a little extra on this machine that makes it more valuable. Let's take a look at the later Victor Talking Machine Model R. This one you can see definitely the metal plate was anodized originally, as was the support arm. It's got a later reproducer, the Exhibition. And it doesn't have a record hold down, nothing to screw on there to hold the record down because it didn't need it. Let's look at the plate here on this one. Taper arm. And you can see this later ID tag incorporates the Nipper the dog logo. The wood tone arm's a little different than the earlier wood tone arms. I hope you enjoy seeing these two machines. As I said, these are one of my favorite front mount machines because they're a nice small size, but they run really well and they play really well.